The phone vibrated softly inside the pocket of his uniform, just as Declan Monroe was bending down to wipe each streak of water on the glossy marble floor of the main lobby at the Golden Crest Bay Hotel. Normally, he would never dare pick up during work hours, especially in a crowded area like this. Rule number 1, repeated so often by manager Mark Ellison that everyone could recite it. Janitorial staff must not, under any circumstances, use personal phones in public areas. But when the screen lit up, Declan's heart suddenly stalled. It was a call from Radboud University in the Netherlands. After 7 rounds of submitting his application for a linguistics master's scholarship and being rejected every time, this call could be the turning point. A chance to break free from exhausting night shifts. A chance to pick up Hazel, his 7-year-old daughter, from school on time instead of relying on neighbors every morning. "Just 1 minute," Declan whispered to himself, stepping quickly behind a large marble column, hoping no one in the lobby would notice. "Declan Monroe speaking," he answered, keeping his voice low. The voice on the other end spoke Dutch with flawless precision. Unmistakable. It was Professor Lawrence Kieft from Radboud University. Declan immediately switched to Dutch, his tone deep and steady, his pronunciation smooth as a native speaker as they discussed details of his application. "Uw motivatiebrief is helaas niet op tijd aangekomen," Declan explained, worried that his motivation letter might not have arrived on time. "Ik heb het 2 weken geleden verstuurd." And right at that moment, all surrounding sounds seemed to be sucked out of the air. Declan froze, slowly lifting his head. Madeline Prescott, the billionaire owner of the entire hotel chain, was standing just a few steps away. Her eyes were fixed on him, unmistakably surprised. Beside her, Mark Ellison stood rigid, his cold, sharp gaze filled with fury. Declan swallowed hard. "Ik moet gaan. Ik bel je later terug," he said quickly in Dutch before hanging up at once. "Monroe, my office." Now Mark Ellison's voice sliced through the air like a blade, cold, emotionless, making Declan feel as if the blood in his veins had stopped moving. If you're following the story and want to see how Declan will handle the storm about to hit, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what happens next. In your opinion, why was Madeline Prescott surprised? By Declan's talent, or by a far bigger secret? The walk down to the small basement office felt endless. Each step weighed heavy. Declan could sense his co-workers' eyes on his back, some filled with sympathy, others gleaming with barely concealed satisfaction. At 34, he was the only person in the janitorial department with a college degree, and Mark Ellison, his manager, never missed a chance to remind everyone of that, not to praise him, but to mock him. The office door shut with a dry, final thud. 6 years of memories surged back all at once. 6 years ago, 28-year-old Declan Monroe had just graduated with honors in linguistics from UC Berkeley. He was fluent in 6 languages: English, Dutch, French, Italian, Mandarin, and Japanese. 2 of his research papers had been published in an international journal. His future stretched before him, wide and bright. Then disaster struck. Emma, his wife, died in a traffic collision, leaving him alone with 1-year-old Hazel and a mountain of medical debt. Declan applied for a position in the International Relations Department at the Golden Crest Bay Hotel. Outstanding degree, internship experience at the United Nations, rare language skills. He thought he'd be called in for an interview immediately. But no. He sent a total of 52 job applications, ranging from international relations and translation to front desk. Not a single reply. Not one phone call. "Mr. Monroe, we're looking for candidates with more practical experience," Mark Ellison, Then the assistant HR director said in a voice so bureaucratic it felt cold, "Degrees alone are not enough. Perhaps you should consider positions more suitable to your circumstances." What did more suitable mean? Single father? No networking? No connections? Someone juggling hours just to keep working while raising a child? Crushed by medical bills and rent, Declan accepted a temporary janitorial position. Just a few months, he reassured himself, just to get a foot inside the door. Then they'll see what I can do. But a few months turned into a year. Then 2. Then 3. He applied to transfer departments 15 times. Every time he was rejected. And, coincidentally, the signature on every rejection belonged to Mark Ellison, now promoted to operations director. The reasons were vague. Insufficient hotel experience. Not a fit for company culture. Timing not appropriate. Meanwhile, Declan watched people with lower degrees and less experience being hired into the very positions he had once applied for. What did they all have in common? They weren't single parents. They didn't have family burdens. They could work overtime, travel, attend happy hour. Declan could not. He had to pick up Hazel at 6 p.m. He had to cook dinner, read her bedtime stories. Saturdays were for ballet classes. Sundays were the only day left for laundry and meal prep for the week. Other co-workers laughed, chatted, used their phones freely during shifts. No one said a word. But when Declan received an urgent call from Hazel's school because she had a fever, Mark had yelled at him right in the middle of the crowded lobby. "Monroe, do you understand what professionalism means? If you can't focus on your work, maybe you should find another place to work." Now, in the cramped basement office, the cold neon light shone harshly on Mark Ellison's unfriendly face. He sat behind an old desk, arms folded across his chest, eyes cold and impatient. "You know the rules, Monroe. No using your phone during work hours, especially in public areas." Declan drew a breath, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm sorry, sir. But that was the university in the Netherlands calling, about my master's scholarship. I've been waiting for that call for—" "I don't care who the call was from," Mark cut in, his voice sharp as a blade. "What I care about is that Mrs. Madeline Prescott, the owner of this hotel, saw a janitor ignoring his duties to chit-chat on the phone in the middle of the main lobby." The injustice flared in Declan's chest, burning like acid. The front desk staff made personal calls all day. No one said a word. But he, for a call that could change his entire future and his daughter's, was punished harshly. "I'm assigning you to clean the convention center restrooms for the next 3 months, Mark declared, spitting out each word like a command. "There, you can practice as many languages as you like without embarrassing this hotel." Declan felt his stomach tighten. The convention center meant double shifts after every corporate event. Endless nights with no extra pay. It was Mark's familiar punishment for anyone who dared step out of line. "And one more thing." Mark narrowed his eyes, the corner of his mouth twisting into a bitter smile. "I'll let this slide this time. But if you have any ridiculous ideas about advancing in this company, forget them. You're a janitor, Monroe. That's the position best suited for you." He paused for a beat, his voice dropping lower but turning even colder. "Don't get too ambitious." That night was one of the longest nights of Declan's life. In the small one-bedroom apartment in the Mission District, where he lived with Hazel, Declan sat at the worn kitchen table, his eyes fixed on the framed college degree hanging on the paint-peeled wall. Bachelor of Arts in Linguistics, with highest honors University of California, Berkeley. Next to it were international language certificates, published research papers, and a photo of him standing beside Emma on graduation day. Emma. If she were still alive, everything would have been different. The two of them could have supported each other, one caring for Hazel while the other pursued their career. They would have been a team. But now it was just him, fighting everything alone. Declan opened his old laptop and logged into his inbox. 52 internal job applications, not a single meaningful response, only hollow messages. We have selected a more suitable candidate for the position. Or worse, complete silence. He opened his bank account. Balance, $847. Next month's rent, $1,200. Hazel's ballet lessons, $150. Utilities, $180. The numbers simply didn't add up. Hazel was asleep in the tiny room, clutching the teddy bear Emma had given her before she passed away. Declan looked at her through the slightly open door, and his heart felt squeezed tight. She deserved better. She deserved a father who didn't have to work 3 shifts a day. She deserved summer vacations. She deserved new shoes instead of worn ones patched over and over. Declan remembered Emma's words at the hospital, just before she closed her eyes for the last time. Declan, you're so talented. Don't ever let them make you feel small. Promise me. Don't give up your dreams because of me or because of Hazel. We want you to shine, but was he already giving up? Had he allowed Mark Ellison and people like him to make him believe he was only worthy of cleaning bathrooms? Declan stood up and walked to the closet. He pulled out his housekeeping uniform, the pale blue shirt with his name embroidered on the pocket. Declan. Housekeeping. He placed it next to his college degree. The contrast was painfully suffocating. A man with an honors degree, fluent in 6 languages, published in international journals, scrubbing toilets. Not because he lacked ability, not because he lacked effort, but because the system was designed to keep people in their place. Declan thought about giving up, thought that maybe Mark was right. Maybe he really was just a janitor. Maybe his dream of ever using his education was nothing but an illusion. But then he looked at Hazel sleeping, and he realized, if he gave up, what was he teaching her? That when life is hard, you should surrender? That when a system is unfair, you must bow your head and accept it? Number. Emma would never want that. Declan wiped his tears and took a deep breath. Just hold on a little longer, he whispered to himself. One chance. Just one chance. The next morning, Declan arrived at the hotel earlier than usual, heart filled with determination. No matter how unfairly he was treated, he still had to maintain absolute professionalism. He would not give Mark Ellison another excuse to criticize him. At exactly 8 a.m., the phone at the front desk rang. Jennifer, the head receptionist, picked up. She glanced at Declan with a puzzled expression. Declan Monroe? HR wants to see you immediately. The space around them fell silent. His co-workers turned to look, some curious, some worried, and a few unable to hide their delight at seeing something unfold. The Human Resources Department was on the 32nd floor, right next to the executive offices. A territory most janitorial staff would never step foot in. In the elevator, Declan stood among a group of executives discussing deals worth millions of dollars. No one looked at him. Not a glance, not a nod, as if he were invisible. He was used to that by now. 6 years of working as a janitor was enough to turn anyone into a shadow. People walked past, without acknowledging. Monroe, Hannah Cole, the HR director, called the moment he stepped into the bright, spacious office with glass windows overlooking the entire city. Please, have a seat. Declan sat on the firm chair, back straight, hands resting on his thighs. He braced himself for the worst. Termination. Surely that was it? Hannah studied him for a moment, her voice calm. Mrs. Prescott wants to meet with you. Right now, Declan's eyes widened slightly. The hotel owner wanted to see him? The air in the room suddenly grew heavy, suffocating. Madeline Prescott's office was so spacious that Declan felt as though he had stepped into an entirely different world. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows opened to a sweeping view of the San Francisco Bay, sunlight shimmering on the silvery blue water. In the distance, the Golden Gate Bridge appeared faint and ethereal in the morning mist. Madeline Prescott, 48 years old, a symbol of cold elegance and razor-sharp intellect, sat behind a glossy black wooden desk. She was the woman who had saved countless failing hotels, transforming them into luxury assets. In the business world, they called her the Ice Queen. Now, that powerful woman was looking straight at Declan. Dutch, French, Italian, Mandarin, Japanese, and English, correct? She asked curtly, opening a thick file in front of her. Declan stiffened slightly. Yes, that's correct. Your file. Madeline flipped through a few pages. I requested HR to send it immediately after hearing you speak yesterday. She paused, her gaze cold and cutting. Honors degree in linguistics from Berkeley. Fluent in 6 languages, including 2 Asian languages. And you've been cleaning bathrooms in my hotel for 6 years. She set the file down on the desk. Explain that to me, Mr. Monroe. Declan felt his throat dry. I've submitted 52 internal transfer applications, and all of them were rejected. By whom? Mark Ellison, ma'am, and Thomas Whitmore. The operations director, Madeline, wrote the 2 names down in her notebook, her expression unchanged. Interesting, she said slowly. Mr. Whitmore has been constantly complaining about the lack of multilingual staff available to serve international guests, especially for Asian conferences. She lifted her head, her eyes sharp as if reading his thoughts. What Declan didn't know was this. 3 months earlier, she had hired a consulting firm to secretly investigate the unusually high turnover rate among skilled employees on the East Coast. And what they discovered was something Madeline could no longer ignore. Mr. Monroe, she continued, her tone firm, tomorrow the hotel is hosting a trade conference with Dutch and Chinese executives. I need someone who truly speaks both languages fluently and understands the cultures. She paused for a beat. And? You want me to clean their meeting room, right? Declan said, unable to hide the sting of sarcasm and hurt. For the first time since he had entered the office, Madeline smiled. I want you to be our international relations coordinator for the event. Temporarily. Salary, $5,000 a week. Effective. Today, Declan nearly dropped his bag. $5,000 a week, more than he earned in 3 months combined. Why me, ma'am? There must be many candidates far better. Madeline Prescott locked eyes with him. Because I heard you speak Dutch like a native. Because you have exactly what I need. And because I believe something very wrong is happening inside this company. An hour later, Declan stepped out of the elevator with a brand-new employee badge gleaming on his chest and full access to the hotel's system. The feeling was surreal, as if he had just crossed into a world he had only observed from afar for the past 6 years. On his way to HR to finish the paperwork, he accidentally crossed paths with Mark Ellison. That moment was priceless. Mark froze, his face draining of color, as if he were witnessing the impossible. Monroe? What are you doing on this floor? And why aren't you in uniform? Mark's voice was tense, still cold and sharp as always. but today it trembled ever so slightly. "Working, Mr. Ellison," Declan replied evenly. "International Relations Coordinator." At Mrs. Prescott's direct request, a visible crack appeared across Mark's expression. "No, no way. You don't have the qualifications to—" "Berkeley," Declan interjected, keeping his professional tone. "Fluent in 6 languages, including Mandarin and Dutch. My records have been in HR's files for 6 years, along with 52 transfer applications, all rejected by you." Mark opened his mouth, searching for an excuse, but no words came out. Declan walked away, leaving him standing frozen in the polished hallway. In the HR office, Declan found an unexpected ally. Hannah Cole, a newly hired recruiting analyst, her eyes lighting up when she saw him enter. "Declan! Finally!" "I'm so glad they called you up," Hannah whispered, sorting through documents and shaking her head in disbelief. "I saw your file in my first week and genuinely couldn't understand why someone with your qualifications was working in sanitation. I tried talking to Mr. Whitmore, but he shut me down immediately." She didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was unmistakable. That afternoon, while Declan prepared materials for the conference in the VIP lounge, he discovered something that made his heart sink. The Mandarin translations in the packet were badly wrong. Not just incorrect words, incorrect tone, incorrect cultural nuances. So wrong they could cause diplomatic misunderstandings, potentially ruin the entire conference. Without hesitation, he grabbed a pen and corrected each error, adjusting forms of address, sentence structure, and nuance. Then he redesigned the entire welcome package. "How do you know they're wrong?" Madeline's voice came from the doorway. She had been standing there who knew how long, arms folded, watching him work. Declan turned. "The terminology is outdated and could be considered offensive in corporate Chinese. Whoever translated this knows only the basics. They don't understand cultural subtleties." Madeline nodded, her eyes sharp as though assembling pieces of a much larger puzzle. "Mr. Whitmore assured me he hired the best translator." She emphasized each word. "Cost a fortune." "He hired someone without verifying their competence," Declan said plainly, pointing at a major error right on the first page of the partnership proposal. Silence filled the room, not the comfortable kind, but the kind that came before a storm. The next day, the conference officially began. Declan moved among the international executives as though he were born for this work. He switched seamlessly between Dutch and Mandarin, listening, interpreting, connecting. No hesitation, no awkwardness. He created diplomatic bridges that would normally take weeks of negotiation. Watching him then, no one would ever guess he spent every night cleaning the ground floor. During the break, Thomas Whitmore, the powerful man who had never once voluntarily spoken to Declan in 6 years, approached him. His smile was the kind perfected in front of a mirror, polished but empty. "Mr. Monroe," Whitmore began, his voice dripping with social nicety. "Very impressive. It appears Mark underestimated your potential." Declan returned a polite smile. "Thank you. It's interesting how the part of my file stating I'm fluent in Mandarin was overlooked, especially considering the hotel paid $50,000 for substandard translation services for this conference." Whitmore's smile froze instantly. I'm sure there must have been some misunderstanding," he stammered. "I never received—" "I have read receipts for every email sent over the last 6 years," Declan interrupted gently, "including those warning about serious translation errors for the Asian events." The air between them thickened, suffocating. What Declan didn't say, but both of them knew, was that Hannah had given him access to the entire translation contract files. The company hired belonged to Whitmore's niece. No experience, no certifications, yet charging rates equal to top-tier specialists. Worse, every previous translation had the same errors. Errors capable of costing companies millions of dollars and damaging international credibility. Looking at Whitmore now, Declan no longer felt small. He was no longer invisible. On the third day of the conference, something unexpected happened. While Declan was assisting a group of Dutch business executives, one of them suddenly squinted, tilted his head, then exclaimed, "Wait! Aren't you the author of that outstanding study on linguistic variation in international business, published in the Journal of Applied Linguistics?" Declan froze for a moment, hardly believing what he'd heard. "Yes, that's me." "Heavens!" the man burst out, full of excitement. "I've cited your research at 2 major conferences already." And immediately, he called more colleagues over to meet Declan, shaking his hand enthusiastically as if he were an honored guest. The scene drew attention from afar. Madeline leaned lightly against the upstairs railing, observing. Her gaze was sharp, cool, as if assessing an entire chessboard. What caught her attention most? Whitmore's face slowly losing its artificial confidence. A visible line of worry creased his forehead. His polite smile twisted at the edges. He didn't know, or didn't want to know, that while he had spent years smiling socially and pretending to be in control, Declan had been quietly weaving a net made of data, of contracts, of email confirmations, of repeated translation errors, of truth, a net that didn't just expose one man's mistakes, but an entire system of discrimination and hidden corruption, one that had suppressed talents like him for years, while lucrative contracts were handed to people unqualified for the work. What no one at the Golden Crest Bay Hotel realized, at least not yet, was that the single father working night shifts, the man who had answered the phone in flawless Dutch that day, was not at the conference by coincidence. Behind this seemingly simple department transfer, a plan was already in motion. A calculated plan. A plan that would not only change Declan's life, but fling the doors wide open for the truth to break free. The question was no longer whether he could prove what had happened. The question was, when the truth comes out, how devastating will it be? On the 4th morning of the conference, the Golden Crest Bay Hotel buzzed like a beehive. Thanks to Declan's initiative, the preliminary contracts had exceeded all expectations. The atmosphere was so energized that everyone felt the company was on the brink of a major breakthrough. As Declan walked past the main lobby, he stumbled upon a sight that made him halt. Thomas Whitmore was escorting a young woman, so tense her hand gripped her folder tightly, toward the executive elevator. "Ms. Whitmore, your Mandarin translation is good enough," Whitmore said through a strained voice. "No need to worry." Declan recognized her instantly. His niece. She was holding a folder clearly labeled Final Translation. Key Contract. Just one quick glance as he walked by was enough to confirm his fear. The serious errors, previously debated, previously reported, were still present. This couldn't be allowed to slide. Mrs. Prescott needed to know immediately. Declan hurried to the CEO's office and knocked, but didn't wait for permission before entering. Madeline was reviewing a stack of documents. She looked up, her expression sharpening when she saw his urgency. "Declan, what is it?" "Mr. Whitmore is replacing my correct translation with the flawed version, the one his niece made." He placed his phone on the desk, showing Madeline a series of screenshots. "And I have proof this has been happening for years." Madeline shot to her feet, her chair gliding back slightly. "You're absolutely certain? I've recorded everything. And I found the payment history for her translation company." They were paid triple the market rate, while qualified candidates like me were systematically rejected. As they spoke, Hannah Cole dashed into the office, slightly out of breath from running. "Mrs. Prescott, sorry to interrupt, but I found something you need to see immediately." She handed over a thick folder. 5 years of recruitment files. There's a consistent pattern: rejecting qualified candidates, especially single parents, anyone with family commitments, and anyone considered not flexible with working hours. Madeline turned the pages, and her face grew icy cold. The external investigation revealed something irregular. But this is a system. At that moment, the door swung open. Whitmore stepped in. No knock, no permission. "Madeline, the Dutch delegation is ready to sign, but they're asking about inconsistencies in the translation." Monroe must have made a mistake. The air froze instantly. Madeline walked slowly to the door, then shut it behind her with a cold, decisive click. "Thomas," she said, her voice calm to the point of danger, "I'm looking at a $50,000 payment for substandard translation, while we have a qualified employee scrubbing bathrooms. Explain." Whitmore went pale. I don't know what you're referring to. We hired the best—" "Your niece, Thomas." Madeline cut him off. "Ashley Whitmore. 0 experience in formal Mandarin, fake certification," Declan added, placing a printed email on the desk. "I just confirmed with Peking University. They never issued a certificate to Ashley Whitmore." Whitmore whipped around, throwing Declan a glare filled with venom. "You're nobody," he hissed. "Just a janitor who thinks he can sit at the grown-ups' table." Declan's expression didn't change. "Ph.D. in Applied Linguistics from Berkeley," he corrected calmly. "With 6 international publications, all filed in HR, repeatedly ignored by you." "Thomas." Madeline stepped in, her voice sharp as steel. "I've called an emergency board meeting in 30 minutes. By then, I want your resignation letter on the table." Whitmore let out a hollow laugh. "You can't be serious." "Over this? Over him?" "Choose your next word very carefully," Madeline said, each syllable icy and lethal. A warning, a verdict, an ending. 2 hours later, the executive conference hall was packed. Every manager, supervisor, and director had been urgently summoned. The air was heavy, tight, like a stretched string. In the front row, the Dutch and Chinese executives sat upright, observing everything with curious suspicion. Mark Ellison, now stripped of his usual authority, sat awkwardly beside other department heads, looking like someone dragged out of a bad dream. Madeline stepped onto the stage. Declan stood beside her, quiet but confident. "Today," Madeline began, her voice clear and strong like a bell, "we uncovered a system of discrimination and nepotism that has cost this company millions of dollars." A soft murmur rippled through the room. "For years," she continued, "managers like Thomas Whitmore and Mark Ellison have enforced unofficial policies that harmed employees and destroyed our profits." Behind her, the large screen lit up. A massive presentation appeared. Charts comparing employee qualifications, talented people held down in low positions, alongside statistics of systematic rejection, and inflated contracts tied directly to management's family members. Madeline turned toward Declan. "Mr. Monroe, whom some of you only know as a janitor, saved this company from financial and diplomatic disaster this week." The room stirred. He corrected translations that could have cost us millions in contractual misunderstandings. The Asian executives nodded approvingly, some even clapping softly in respect. Madeline continued, her tone icy. "As a result of this investigation, Mr. Thomas Whitmore is terminated immediately for severe misconduct. A gasp sounded from the back row. Mark Ellison is suspended while we complete an investigation into his involvement. Madeline swept her gaze across the room. And effective immediately, we are auditing the entire recruitment and promotion process for the past 5 years. Silence fell, stunned and heavy. Mark bowed his head, pale as if all the blood had drained from him. Then Madeline smiled, a small, deliberate smile. "And finally," she said, "I am pleased to announce Dr. Declan Monroe will take on the role of Global Director of Internal Communications, overseeing all multilingual operations for the company." The moment she finished, the room erupted in applause. Some clapped hesitantly. Some clapped out of politeness. But many, truly, clapped with emotion. Especially the janitorial team sitting at the back. They stood up, eyes shimmering with tears, applauding the man who had risen from the same position they were in. As Declan and Madeline stepped off the stage, he caught a glimpse of Whitmore being escorted out of the building by security. His face twisted into something between rage and despair. A man who couldn't believe his game was over. As he passed Declan, he hissed through clenched teeth, "You won't last a month." Declan only smiled. No bitterness, no challenge, just a smile that knew the truth. Inside the pocket of his new blazer, the small recorder remained, holding every discriminatory, threatening, and desperate word Whitmore had let slip in recent days. Declan knew, if needed, the truth was still there. And this time, he was no longer invisible. That night, the small apartment in the Mission District felt quieter than usual. Declan sat beside Hazel's bed. The 7-year-old hugged her teddy bear tightly, her big round eyes gazing up at him, eyes exactly like Emma's, clear and capable of melting his heart. "Daddy, you don't have to work tonight?" Hazel asked, her voice tiny as a kitten's. "No, sweetheart." Declan smiled, gently brushing her hair. "I won't be working night shifts anymore." "Really?" Hazel's eyes lit up like fireworks. "So you can walk me to school every day now?" Declan nodded, emotion tightening in his throat. "Yes, and this weekend, we're going to see a real ballet performance. Not just watch videos on YouTube anymore." Hazel sprang up and wrapped her arms around him, her little arms tightening around his neck. "Daddy, you're the best in the world." When Hazel finally drifted to sleep, her breathing steady, her face peaceful under the soft glow of the nightlight, Declan stood and walked to the window. The city of San Francisco stretched beneath him, glittering with lights. He took out his phone. The screen lit up with Emma's photo, her gentle smile, her eyes full of faith. "Emma," he whispered, voice trembling slightly. "I did it. Not for me, for Hazel, for everyone still stuck the way I once was." He remembered Emma's final words, the ones he had carried through all those difficult years. "Don't ever let them make you feel small." Now, he understood completely. Strength isn't about never being pushed to the bottom. Strength is about rising, again and again, scrubbing away the stains of an unjust system, and opening the door for those behind you to climb up. 6 months had passed since that fateful day. The day Declan answered a phone call in Dutch in the lobby of the Golden Crest Bay Hotel, when everyone around him still believed he was nothing more than a janitor. What had once been a story about justice for one man had now become a quiet wave spreading through the entire American hospitality industry. Now, Declan's office sat on the 32nd floor, where morning sunlight washed over a sweeping view of San Francisco. On the door, an elegant oak plaque read, "Dr. Declan Monroe, Vice President of Talent Development and International Relations." His salary was now 5 figures per month, not 5 figures per year. But real power wasn't in the number. It was in the fact that he could change the lives of those overlooked, just as he once had been. Hannah, now an executive assistant and his closest friend, stepped in with a proud smile. "The restructuring committee is ready, Dr. Monroe." Declan nodded, took a deep breath, and walked into the large conference room where Madeline and the entire board were waiting. Today was the day he presented the final report of the Hidden Talents Initiative, the program Declan had built from the ground up to find and uplift talented employees systematically ignored by the system. "The results of the pilot program have exceeded all expectations," Declan began, his voice steady but confident. Behind him, charts appeared clearly on the screen. In 6 months, we identified 183 employees with exceptional skills in languages, finance, management, and technology. Individuals stuck in positions far below their real capability. He paused for a beat. And 89% of them are single parents, caregivers, or employees with personal commitments. Reasons incorrectly interpreted as lack of flexibility, costing them opportunities for years. Madeline looked up, her eyes glowing with pride. This was exactly what Declan had requested when accepting his new position. Not just to fix his life, but to fix the entire system. "The most impressive part," Declan continued, "is the financial impact. Outsourced translation costs have dropped by 78%. International guest satisfaction is up 51%. And our diversity index now leads the entire industry." He swept his eyes across the room, meeting the attentive faces one by one. All of that, simply by giving real opportunities to people who were already on our payroll. Across the United States, many people were following the conference with very different emotions. In Sacramento, Mark Ellison watched the broadcast from a small, dimly lit hotel. The weak light reflected off his worn-out face. After a full investigation, he narrowly avoided being completely terminated by accepting a demotion and a transfer. Now, Mark spent his days managing the laundry department of a second-rate hotel. A humiliating reminder of how many talented people he had rejected because of his prejudice and arrogance. Thomas Whitmore did not watch. After being fired, no luxury hotel in the country would hire him. The allegations of systematic discrimination and corruption had slammed every door shut, staining his reputation beyond repair. Rumors spread across the industry. Whitmore was now working as a night shift manager at a roadside motel in Arizona, a position even newcomers in the field rarely wanted. As for Ashley, his niece, she received a softer but equally bitter ending. She had to repay the inflated fees from all the translation contracts, complete mandatory professional ethics training, and was now studying Mandarin on a scholarship from the Coleman Foundation for Inclusive Language Education. A perfect irony. The woman who once called herself a professional translator ultimately had to start learning from zero. "And finally," Declan said, turning to face the camera broadcasting to every hotel in the chain, "I want to share something personal." He paused. A long silence swept across the room, heavy with meaning. "I grew up in a very humble family," he began, his voice warm and steady. "My father was a carpenter. My mother worked at a laundry shop. They sacrificed everything so I could attend college, the first in my family to ever reach that milestone." Declan took a deep breath, as if preparing to open an old door inside his heart. "When my wife, Emma, passed away, leaving me with a 1-year-old and overwhelming debt, I thought my dreams were over. I took a cleaning job, telling myself it was temporary. In the front row, many executives, particularly those recently promoted thanks to the Hidden Talents Initiative, quietly wiped their eyes. 6 years, Declan said softly, but the words cut like a blade. I lost 6 years. Not because I lacked ability, not because I didn't try, but because I was a single father. Because I had to pick my daughter up at 6 p.m. instead of going to happy hour. Because I couldn't stay late. Because I had to care for my child. Declan looked straight into the camera, unflinching, unwavering. Emma used to tell me, "Declan, you're talented. Don't let anyone make you feel small." But I did. I let this system convince me I was only worthy of a mop and bucket. His voice caught. What Emma never got to see is this moment. She didn't witness the fact that her sacrifice, and my parents', has finally been honored. And that is perhaps the greatest sorrow of all. The room fell silent, a heavy, reverent silence. And I realized, Declan continued, his voice growing steadier again, the true strength of a company isn't in its numbers, but in the people it lifts up, in the potential it unlocks. For decades, the hospitality industry, like many others, has unintentionally buried extraordinary talent beneath anonymous uniforms, has underestimated those with special circumstances, has assumed they belong only in invisible roles. Madeline was the first to stand, her hands clapping boldly. Then the entire room rose. Applause swept through like a wave, reaching hundreds of employees watching from afar. And in that moment, Declan was no longer the man who mopped floors. He was the man who had changed an entire system. That afternoon, Declan received an envelope neatly placed on his desk. Inside was a postcard from Amsterdam and a letter printed on Radboud University letterhead. Professor Lawrence Kieft, the man who had unintentionally set everything in motion with that Dutch phone call 6 months earlier, had followed Declan's life-changing journey from beginning to end. Dear Declan, your story has inspired our entire linguistics department. We would like to offer you a position as visiting professor for our International Business Communication program. Your journey from janitor to VP proves that talent persists, even when systems fail to recognize it. Declan let out a soft laugh as he folded the letter. Ironically, just when he had stopped looking, the door to his old dream opened again. But this time, he didn't need to chase it. He had a greater mission now. The next day, Declan officially announced a new scholarship fund for hotel employees and their children, partially financed by his new salary and partially by voluntary contributions from international partners. And the first scholarship recipient made him smile for a long time. The daughter of an old janitorial co-worker, a girl who once told Declan she dreamed of becoming a hotel manager, even though her family couldn't afford it. Now, her dream would begin. And Declan knew. That was the true victory. A week later, Declan did something he hadn't dared to do since stepping into the executive offices. He went back to the basement. The housekeeping locker room was exactly the same. Rusted metal lockers, worn wooden benches, tired yellow lighting, and the familiar smell of cleaning chemicals clinging to every patch of wall. He opened locker number 47, his locker for 6 years, and pulled out his final uniform. The pale blue shirt, simple, with his name embroidered on the pocket. Declan, housekeeping. He lifted it, his fingertips brushing lightly across the fabric. In that moment, he felt the full weight of 6 years. Not the weight of the shirt, but the weight of dreams pushed aside, of potential buried, of dignity once overlooked. Declan? He turned around. Rosa stood there, 58 years old, warm eyes, the woman who had shared countless exhausted nights and bone-tired shifts with him. Rosa, Declan smiled softly, I have something I want to give you. He handed her a new employee badge, shiny, proud. Next week, you start your new position. Coordinator, International Guest Services. Hannah will train you, and the salary is triple what you're making now." Rosa froze, her mouth opening but no sound coming out. Then her eyes filled with tears. "Declan, I only have a high school diploma. How can—" "You speak fluent Spanish and Portuguese," Declan answered gently. "That's exactly what we need. Degrees matter, but not as much as real talent." Rosa threw her arms around him, trembling with emotion. Declan hugged her back, then looked around the room. How many talented people had been overlooked in this cramped space? How many people like him, like Rosa, had waited for someone to truly see them? He knew the answer, and he had already made a decision. He would find them, one by one. That Saturday, Declan fulfilled the promise he had made to Hazel. The two of them went to the San Francisco Ballet Theater to watch The Nutcracker. Hazel wore a brand-new dress, the first in her life that wasn't a hand-me-down. When the stage lights blazed on and the dancers spun gracefully, Hazel's eyes sparkled like stars. After the performance, they stopped by Ghirardelli Square for ice cream. Hazel chose chocolate, licking it happily as the cool breeze from the bay brushed past them. "Daddy," Hazel said, her voice thoughtful, "can I ask you something?" "Always, sweetheart." "Well, why did you work at the hotel for so long? Even when they weren't nice to you?" Declan paused for a second. He weighed his words, not to hide anything, but to help Hazel understand in the gentlest way. "Sweetheart," he said, "sometimes in life, there are people who don't see your real worth. They just see the job you're doing, or how things look on the outside, or your circumstances, and think that's all there is." "But you proved them wrong," Hazel said immediately, her wide eyes full of pride. "Not exactly proved them wrong," Declan corrected gently. "More like helped them see more clearly. Open their eyes. And most importantly, I don't want anyone to wait 6 years just to be seen." Hazel nodded firmly. "Like a superhero, right?" Declan laughed. "Something like that." But without a cape, Hazel was quiet for a few seconds, then asked the question he knew would come eventually. "Do you think Mom would be proud?" Declan's chest tightened. He swallowed his emotions and answered with sincere honesty. "I know she would be. Not because I succeeded, but because I didn't give up. That's what she wanted to teach us." On the way home, Hazel fell asleep, her head leaning to one side. In the rearview mirror, Declan looked at her with a heart overflowing with love. Everything he had gone through, 6 difficult years, nights so exhausting he cried, days he lived like an invisible man, was worth it. If the result was Hazel growing up in a world that was kinder, fairer, a world her father helped change. A year after that fateful phone call in Dutch, Declan stood on the stage of the National Hospitality Conference in Chicago. The Hidden Talents Initiative had expanded to 47 hotel chains across the country. More than 2,000 employees had been identified, retrained, and promoted into positions that truly reflected their real abilities. But today, Declan wasn't talking about numbers. "There's someone I want you to meet," he said, gesturing with an open hand. Rosa stepped onto the stage, now the regional director of guest relations for the entire West Coast. Her suit was sharp, her posture upright, her steps steady. No longer the woman who cleaned restrooms with downward eyes out of shyness. A year had changed many things. "This is Rosa Martinez," Declan introduced. 1 year ago, she worked for minimum wage, even though she spoke 3 languages and had 2 decades of experience in customer service. Today, she manages 150 staff members and has raised international guest satisfaction by 63%, Thunderous applause filled the hall. Rose's story is not an exception, Declan continued. It's a pattern. All across this industry, there are thousands of Roses, thousands of Declans, talented individuals buried beneath bias, age, family circumstances, or simply because they didn't fit the mold. He paused, sweeping his gaze across the entire hall. What began with a phone call in Dutch created ripples, spreading far beyond one hotel. The message is clear. Talent is everywhere. What is missing is opportunity and recognition. After the conference, Declan drove to Colma Cemetery, just outside San Francisco. Hazel, now 8 years old, held her father's hand as they walked along the quiet path, the evening breeze rustling through the rows of trees. They stopped in front of Emma's grave. Declan placed a bouquet of white roses, her favorite, and beside it, he set down his old employee badge. Declan Monroe. Housekeeping. Emma! His voice tightened. I did it. Not just for myself, but for all the people who were told they weren't good enough. That they should know their place. Hazel squeezed her father's hand. You taught me that true worth doesn't come from what others see, but from what we know about ourselves. Declan continued. It took me 6 years to remember that. But now, I'll do everything I can so no one else has to lose 6 years like I did. He knelt down and placed his hand on the headstone. Emma, you were wrong about one thing, he whispered. You said some doors would never open, but they can open. You just have to be brave enough to push harder. And once they open, we must keep them open for those who come after. Hazel placed a small teddy bear on the grave, something she bought herself using her saved allowance. Mom, I love you, and I'm proud of Dad. As they stood up to leave, Declan turned back for one last look. The sunset cast its warm light across the headstone where it read, Emma Monroe, beloved wife and mother. See the best in others. Beneath it lay the housekeeping badge, no longer a mark of shame, but a symbol of the journey. A reminder that where you start never decides where you end. As father and daughter walked away from the cemetery, the golden glow over San Francisco Bay formed a radiant scene, like a quiet confirmation. One phone call in Dutch changed everything, not just because it saved one man, but because it opened the door for thousands more. And that door will never close again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for being here. See you in the next video.